Thank you. Panels have been great so far. It's a tough act to follow. Thank you, everyone. So my name is Tim Reynolds. I'm here at WECC. So I'm the Director of Reliability Risk Management. So just to give you just a little bit of oversight, as said, I did graduate here from the University of Utah. One thing that kept coming to mind was a joke we would always say, because I graduated in electrical engineering, double E, we prefer to be called geeks than nerds because you can't spell geek without a double E. So Chris Raper from he's our VP of strategic engagement here at WECC, was supposed to speak today. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it. So that means I get to geek out to everybody. So thank you so much. So just a little bit about WECC. If you were here when Brandon presented, he did talk about this more in depth. I'm not going to tell you more into it, but kind of show you just a little bit of how WECC is kind of different from other regions that do some similar things that we do. One thing that's very different about WECC is we do have a view of the interconnection as a whole, not just the US, but we have just a little bit of Canada, but also the two provinces up in Canada as well. It does provide us to be able to look at the interconnection as a whole as far as reliability challenges, resiliency that's happening, and all the wonderful innovation that which the electric utilities with stakeholders and everybody else are able to do to be able to help keep the lights on. As we all believe, as we're all here, electricity is essential to everything that we do. It's very important, as part of our society and everything else. And so at WECC, we do strongly believe that. And as we have this very unique view here, we do want to partner with our stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, it's not just the electrical companies that Sarah was mentioning earlier. It's also the regulators, the universities, others, as what we're doing today to help try bring awareness, ideas, thoughts, and have things continue to go along. So as I'm supposed to be talking about electric markets, kind of where we're at in their evolution. So kind of go into this a little bit. I'm showing you here two footprints to electrical markets that are here. I think somebody might still be here from Alberta. So there is a third market within the Western Interconnection. Not a lot of people mention that, but that is up in Alberta. It's managed by the, see here, where was that? The Alberta Electric System Operator. AESO, correct. And so they started about in early 2000s, depending upon what date you're actually looking at, depending what happened. But for today, I'll be specifically talking about these two. So on your left, that is the Western Energy Imbalance Market. That's run out of California ISO. So you'll be able to see their footprint from there. So they've been managing that market since about 2014. The next market that's on your right, that's the Western Energy Imbalance Market. That has been technically in operation. It's ran by the Southwest Power Pool, who on the right side has been in operation since about 2007. That is part of the Eastern Interconnection. So on the left, where they have opened up the market here in the West, that's been in operation since about 2021, so not too long. So one thing to remember about markets is they do allow participants that are a part of it who are voluntary participants. It's not required that you have to be in one of their markets, but those that are volunteers that are in it are able to buy and sell power close to real time, as well as it does help to maintain some transmission congestions, the integration, renewable energy, and everything else. And so there are some successes that have come out of these markets, notably on their websites. Encourage you to go there and they'll tell you everything about it. We're not going to focus too much about that on this presentation, but because of the successes of these markets, they're continuing to be built on. So what is happening is they're now implementing what is called a day-ahead market. So the day-ahead market underneath California ISO here, or the the WEAM is kind of where they're getting to, or where it's at today, I'm sorry. The day-ahead market is actually called the Extended Day-Ahead Market, or EDAM, as I've heard the abbreviation called from most people. And for SPP here, their market, day-ahead market is called SPP's Market Plus. So just to go into this a little bit, what these do is they're looking out more in the future as opposed to more in the real time. So what they're doing is they're looking at the future loads, everything else on the day ahead, sometimes up to 2 days ahead. and so forth to be able to find out what the forecast is and align generation to make sure there's some reliability, especially for those operators in the real-time situation, can have some assurances that there's generation that is available for them in the future. So as part of this, though, there are commitments from the buyer and seller, which they actually have to have it there. As far as the status of setting up these day-ahead markets, so both California ISO and SPP have filed tariffs with FERC. So FERC did approve the EDAM tariff in 2023, and that is expected to go live around the springtime of 2026. And so the SPP for the Markets Plus, they have filed it with FERC. I think it was about mid of this year, a couple of months ago, they did file that. And so currently they are kind of in that back and forth question and answer phase with FERC. Upon approval from FERC, though, they are trying to go live with their Markets Plus in second quarter of 2027. At least that's the anticipation. But again, it's all contingent upon when FERC approves it. So going into this a little bit, and this is where I get to geek out slightly. So Sarah had a map similar to this. So you can't really see the source on that, but if you do go to WECC's website, so it's WECC.org, if you click on a thing called Wildfire Dashboard, so we've talked a lot about wildfires, everything else. This is a dashboard that'll show you current wildfires and transmission lines that are potentially impacted by them. So, but what you can do is change the filters and show all the transmission lines there as publicly available data that we're referencing on this. But there are some things that which, as the markets are operating today, that which, you know, we kind of need to remember. If I do go back here, if you were to line this all together, you're going to find that they do overlap a little bit. Sometimes there's little pockets, and it has to go from one market to the other, you know, as far as changing lines, as far as the flow and exchange of the energy. And that all happens on the transmission system. So the previous presenters did an excellent job in talking about the future needs of the transmission and everything else. Some of the things we have experienced even currently today is, as we line those two things over it, there's what we call the seams issue. So you have two different companies, two different processes, procedures. Sometimes they may not align, right? And so there might be a pocket in the other one that's kind of surrounded by the other market, that they're doing something that might interfere with the other market. And that requires a lot of collaboration to be able to help ensure that these things aren't happening. One of the things that's coming around the corner of next year, I don't know for those that are familiar with the FERC Order 881. So this is the ambient temperatures. Basically in December of 2021, FERC is required transmission providers to implement using ambient adjusted ratings for their transmission lines, meaning that you're using kind of the real-time temperature to determine what the rating is on the line, which impacts how much flow you're going to put around there. Granted, in wintertime, it's a lot colder outside as far as the ambient temperature, your ratings are going to go up. But in the summertime, especially in a long, prolonged heat wave here in the West, those line ratings will be lower, you know, kind of similar to what we have. What this adds a complexion to it is from day to day, hour to hour, those line ratings may be different. So as you're implementing your day ahead markets and 2 days ahead and everything else, how are these line ratings going to impact what you're planning to go on it? So the real-time market still needs to be there to be able to help adjust, and these 1 to 2 day markets do need to be built upon what's happening in real time as well, so we can be able to maintain the resiliency and the integrity of the interconnection as we go about it. So going through this just a little bit more, some complexities that which we've seen as well, and Brandon highlighted this back in, especially in the 2020 heat wave that impacted the Western interconnection, and also a little bit in the 2022 heat wave. I'm sorry. Yeah, the 2022 heat wave. I was thinking of the winter one this year, but that's a different story I'll get into in just a minute here. But in both of those two heat waves, we set a new interconnection peak load here in the Western interconnection. But one of the biggest challenges is late in the afternoon when loads are high, temperatures are still high, but solar starts ramping off in the interconnection. So as we probably talked about here and everything else, you know, battery storage is definitely an option. One thing we learned in the 2020 heat wave when we looked at things is some batteries were still being charged during this time when we needed them the most. So there have been some things, you know, things we've learned during the time that we're trying to implement. But the reason why I'm trying to say this a little bit more is this is where we definitely want to work with stakeholders to be able to make sure we get these lessons learned out, to make sure that which everybody is aware of them, that which we're partnering together and why we need to work together to be able to learn of these challenges that are happening with it. And so I will say just briefly right here, when you go from Oregon down into California, as you see right there, there's the nice little red line right there is the 500 kV line. So that is a major import from all the hydro generation, everything else in the north down into California here in the south. So sometimes we refer to, you know, the Western interconnection as a giant donut. I love that analogy because I love donuts. But kind of Nevada is a little bit in the middle. One thing that happens here in the interconnection is as you do have generation flow from the top to the bottom, as you know, the power is going to flow the path of the least resistance, given the physics of the system. Some of that's going to flow down on the left side. Some of it's also going to flow on the right side, which causes unscheduled flow. Again, with the seams and the markets, you're going to have unscheduled flow that's going to happen regardless of what you're doing. So that's another thing that needs to be balanced and for them to talk about. What happened is, as I mentioned here, on the winter of this year, we had winter storms Jerry and Heather, I believe they were, that came here, you know, starting here in the west, all the way through the east. There was a joint report done by FERC, as well as WECC was a part of that, and the other regions, and our parent organization called NERC, which I'm not going to go into it, but I'll tell you a joke that which my wife says if we ever get two dogs, we have to call them FERC and NERC. You just have a little fun with that. But it's out there on the internet. I highly encourage go and look at it. It talks about it, shows the impact as those storms went across, and they happen one right after another. Traditionally here in the Western interconnection, though, we have flows going from the north to the south. One thing that we've noticed recently, and the trend significantly went the other way starting last year, was more generation is starting to flow from the south up to the north. Part of that is traditionally up in the north, we used to be winter peaking, you know, and then down in the south, it's summer peaking. So the generation that was up north could help supply generation down in the south and vice versa. Now that the north is becoming kind of a dual peaking, you know, winter and summer peaking, there's more demand on the interconnection. And that kind of gets into a little bit of why we need to be able to study the interconnections. What does this really look like in 20 years? And how do the markets participate as part of that? So there's a lot of complexity when it comes to these markets and how they need to balance things and work together to be able to make sure it all works. So there's one more aspect that I'll go into here. This is something new that kind of started up last year. So I'm mentioning it here a little bit. I am by far not the expert on it, but it's called the West-Wide Governance Pathway Initiative. So just think of what everything I told you, but now it changes slightly. So basically this began in July of 2023 when a group of state regulators and energy officers officially submitted a letter stating their intent to create this West-Wide Governance Pathway Initiative. So it was comprised of 26 volunteers from 11 Western states. Basically, it's kind of got 3 steps to it at the moment. The first step is basically taking what California has been able to create. So I'll go back to this one with the energy imbalance market. That's what they're looking to is build upon that and transfer the primary authority over that from the California ISO to an independent governing body. So currently this was approved by the stakeholders in July of 2024 to continue to move this process to have that happen. Let's see here. And it does need to be approved by the California ISO board before it can continue any further. But there is a second step that's focusing on the governance, that after this happens, what is the governance of the organization? What does that look like, as well as development of what this looks like for a more of an interconnection wide regional market. So more to come out of that. Again, that is something new, something that is evolving. And so I expect to see more information regarding that. So again, this is something that just started last year and is getting some traction and moving forward. So again, not going to go too much more into it because I'm learning just as much as about everybody else. So you just learned about all that I know. So, but with all of that being said, it is fascinating. I heard somebody say earlier today too, that when it comes to the industry, things are moving a lot faster than what we're used to, and it is happening a lot more, and there's a lot that happens in real time, and it's exciting to see where we're going to go from here. So thank you.